Before we get started, in the spirit of truth and reconciliation, I'd like to acknowledge that here in Regina, I am on Treaty 4 territory, the traditional lands of the Cree, Dakota, Nakota, Lakota, Saulteaux, and the homeland of the Métis Nations. I would also like to acknowledge and recognize the contributions of our First Nations veterans, their honor, duty, and sacrifice that helped build Canada what it is today. For those who are unaware, this presentation is being put on by KIPS Saskatchewan and presented across Canada by KIPS National. KIPS, or the Canadian Information Processing Society, is Canada's Association of IT Professionals, and we are responsible for three major mandates. The first is the designations of IT professionals through our three IT designations, the AITP designation, or Associate IT Professional designation, which is awarded to students who graduate from a KIPS accredited university. The I.S.P designation, or Information Systems Professional designation, which is Canada's only government-recognized IT professional designation, and it's recognized at the provincial level. And finally, the ITCP designation, or IT Certified Professional designation, which is an internationally recognized IT professional designation that was founded by including KIPS 36 different countries, and that was expanded out to and I don't know the exact number. MJ, do you know the current number of people that have the ITCP, like countries that recognize it? Anyway, for more information about the KIPS and our designations, I encourage you to go to www.kips.ca, and we'll put that into the chat as well. Today's presentation will be done by myself. My name is Thomas Boxall. I am the president of KIPS Saskatchewan, and I am also the Sergeant at Arms of Branch 35 of the Royal Canadian Legion. I will be doing a presentation about my history in the military, everything, and it's labeled Why I Chose the Gun. For those who do not know, the title name is directly taken from a TED Talk done by General Van Erm from the Netherlands military, and talks about the need for the militaries in the world as part of the process for peacemaking. My presentation is going to be broken into three areas, labeled I Choose the Gun, I Answer the Call, and I Tell My Story. And they're going to cover why I joined and a little bit about my career and the particulars of that, specifically the types of equipment I did, the type of job I did. The second section is going to be fully focused on my tour. I did one tour of duty in Afghanistan in 2004. And finally, I'm going to round off with my volunteer service that I do with the Royal Canadian Legion and advocacy for Afghan vets. Before I get started, a note of caution for people on the call. I will be covering content that some people may find awkward, uncomfortable, or disturbing. If at any time you need to step away, please do so with my thanks. You listen for as long as you can, and for that I am grateful. It's not my intent in this presentation to shock, admonish, scold, but instead to give information and inform the people who are attending this presentation. As Remembrance Day approaches, I encourage everybody here on the call to participate in the Remembrance Day services within your local communities. Whether that be in public or in private, there are different services that are available both online and in person. It is very hard as a serviceman to explain why I chose to serve my country. It is something that is ingrained into the culture of servicemen, whether they be military, RCMP, police forces in general, EMT workers, firefighters, or any of the other emergency services. My hope is that my hope is that I can pass on some of the emotions, the background, the intent on why I served and what it has provided for me throughout my life. This Remembrance Day, I encourage people to, instead of thanking veterans for their service, on Remembrance Day specifically, I really encourage you to ask veterans about their service. This allows veterans to tell their story. The biggest challenge that we have as veterans is that there is a feeling that we do not have a voice and that we do not get to make our voice heard. So anytime you ask a veteran, what was your story? What was your tour like? What was your service like? You're giving them a voice. During this presentation, I encourage everybody here to ask questions as you have them. You're not interrupting. You're contributing to the overall presentation and what I'm trying to achieve here today. So with that in mind, let's get started. I chose the gun. So General Van Ulm's presentation, TED Talk on military forces in general, focused on the fact that peace can only be achieved through peaceful means. Diplomats, doctors, engineers, teachers, all the things that we need to build infrastructure, to build technology, to build democracy in a war-torn area. But it is impossible for all these peaceful means to occur while bullets are flying, bombs are being dropped, and people are dying. This is why it falls to the hands of a few who must do violence in order to protect those who can build peace. And it's one thing that is a mythos across every military in the world, is that we're taking up a role within society to help protect society. And while some would abuse the position that we try to fill, our intent, regardless of what military we're a part of, is to protect those who will bring about peace. So what is the Canadian Forces? So the Canadian Armed Forces is the safety net of Canada. The main thing that the Canadian Forces provide is we are the last line of defense for Canada. And this is more than just defending us if Canada were to be invaded. This includes stuff like whenever there's a forest fire and there is not enough firefighters in Canada to put out the fires, the Canadian Forces are brought in. When a snowstorm hits a city and there's not enough maintenance workers to clear out the snow, the military is brought in. Whenever the Red River floods and people's lives are at risk, the military is brought in. This extends to all areas of civilian life, and specifically with myself, I was a member of, let's go back to this. This is the logo of what I wore on my cap edge when I was in the military. I was a member of the communications branch, and specifically, I was a signal operator. A signal operator is somebody who is responsible for establishing communication networks through various different types of communication tools and providing those communications wherever needed. I joined in June of 1999. I'd like to say that I joined for honorable reasons, but ultimately it was for the money. I was going into my second year of university and I could not afford to get a student loan. The previous year I had worked 2 part-time jobs, 12 hours a day for 7 days a week for the entire summer in order to make enough money to pay for 1 year of university. The military offered to pay me a full salary for going on a 2-month basic training course, and then on top of that, they also promised to give me a bursary so that I could reimburse some of my tuition costs at the end of every year of training. So yeah, I went in June. 2 weeks later, I was on a plane to Edmonton, and I did my basic training with the Princess Patricia's Light Infantry, or the PPCLI, one of the 3 major infantry units in Canada. Basic training sucked. It sucked a lot. You wake up every day before the sun comes up, and this is in the middle of the summer, so sun comes up pretty early in the morning, and you were there with it. You did physical training for an hour at the beginning of the day and an hour at the end of the day after the sun's gone down. Every single second of your life over the span of the 2 months that you're on your course is planned out for you. You have training that you do, courses that you're taking, so learning about military history, learning about how to maintain your equipment, learning how to do laundry, learning how to polish your shoes. But there was some very valuable lessons I pulled from that. First and foremost, so my last name is Boxall. I had, and the way that the military structures their basic training is by last name. So when military people talk to me, they refer to me as Boxall rather than as Thomas. And so because my name starts with a B and everybody else had names that start with C, S, whatever, I was at the top of the list for my platoon for names on the list of all the privates that were in training. And so I was picked for platoon senior on the very first day. We knew that there was going to be an inspection the next morning. So that night we were cleaning the barracks. And one of the things that happened was somebody had broken the mop while we were mopping the floors. And we said, well, we'll hide it in a cupboard and it'll be fine. We'll deal with it afterwards. Well, sure enough, I'm the platoon senior, so I have to greet the sergeant of the course and the various master corporals that were in the course right on the very first day of training. And sure enough, the first thing they did is they went right to the closet where we had hidden the broken mop. And right off the bat, the sergeant found the mop. He then, because I'm the platoon senior, I'm the person in charge of the unit, representing all of the unit, he then went to basically yell at me for the better part of 20 minutes, asking me why there's a broken mop in our storage closet. At which point then he got us to go outside, line up in formation, and he yelled at everybody about the fact that we broke a mop. And how dare we damage Canadian Armed Forces equipment, and furthermore, how dare we try to hide this from the sergeant? The sergeant knows all. The sergeant sees all. So the rest of their day was pretty rough. We did a lot of extra duties because we broke the mop. And that night, the sergeant came with a bucket full of toothbrushes and another bucket full of soap. And everybody in the entire platoon was scrubbing the floor till about 2 o'clock in the morning with the toothbrushes, making sure that every single inch of the entire barracks was cleaned. We then had 2 hours to get ready for physical training, so none of us had slept that day. Just before we went for physical training, the sergeant looked at us and said, "I hope you learned your lesson today. There are always consequences to every mistake you make. But if you try to hide those mistakes, if you try to push those mistakes, the consequences to the future, they're going to be significantly worse than if you just own up to it, present it to us. I would have been mad. I would have yelled at you, but I would have got you a new mop, and you wouldn't be mopping the floors with toothbrushes for the rest of the week. And true to his word, at the end of the week, after we had cleaned the floors with toothbrushes for a week, we got a brand new mop. The next thing that we learned on our basic training was the military is about standards and unrealistic standards. No matter how good you are never going to be perfect. You're never going to meet the standard. In our course, when we graduated from the course, our basic training at the end of the course, we got a ranking of top third, mid third, bottom third. But it was impressed on us that, so myself, I was in the top third group. Even though I was in the top third, I still failed because I didn't meet the standard. And this is them pointing out to us that there's always room for improvement. There's always one more thing that you can do better. There's always one more step that you can go on. And I've taken that throughout my entire career, even after the military. There's always something else I could learn. There's always something else I could do. There's always a little bit more that we can push to do. Finally, the last thing the military basic training taught me was attention to detail. We didn't know this on our basic training. I learned it much later when I went on to do my junior leadership training, that your inspection goes until it's done. And it's done when the person who's inspecting you, the Master Corporal who's inspecting you, finds a mistake, because you can always be better. You can always improve. So first they look for the obvious things, where the hospital corner is on your bed perfectly at 45-degree angles. Was your uniform free of wrinkles? Was your boots shined to a perfect mirror shine? Was the spacing of all of your clothing exactly 2 inches apart? And then they start moving to more minor things, like, have you dusted on top of the shelves? Have you swept in the underneath the bed, the dust underneath the bed? Have you lined up your socks in your sock drawer exactly? Are they in perfect alignment, grid format? Was your underwear folded and rolled in the proper military style? And then they went even more in detail. And if you get to that point, you were doing very well in your inspection. If they took 20 minutes to try to find something, you were doing very, very good. Did they get that little bit of dust that's in the crack on the window, that, like, we had the old windows that moved up and down? If they get their fingers in there and pull out a little bit of dust, you knew you were doing well. So there was always that attention to detail. That's the one thing that they always wanted to impress, was that you always have to unlearn everything that you learned and look at everything and say, be perceptive of the stuff around you and say, like, what am I missing here? What is missing? What is that little detail that is going to come back and bite me in the butt? And all this training is to have two things out of it. First is that they want you to develop those muscle memories of when things go really wrong, you can react in a way that is predictable and beneficial to your unit. And secondly, the thing that they want to impress on you is that don't overlook the small things, because the small things could be that sniper hiding in the bush. So don't overlook that and always be aware of it. So the next thing that happened to me in my career is I was lucky enough, because I joined in 1999, that my very first winter, I got to be a part of the operation for Y2K. So for those who are not old enough to remember Y2K, or those who are old enough that they have forgotten Y2K. Y2K was a bug that occurred in computers and computerized software and computerized equipment that essentially made the equipment think that it was 1900 rather than 2000. And the main issue with that was, if anything required that the software to have continuation between 1999 and 2000, it could potentially have weird side effects and break. The military had been prepared for Y2K dating back to the early 1990s. Our software and our equipment was compatible well in advance of on the civilian side. And one of the things, like I alluded to before, the Canadian Forces are Canada's safety net. And because private networks, those owned by Bell, Rogers, TELUS, SaskTel, cannot be 100% guaranteed to be controlled by the government or under the full structure of the government, and cannot be regulated to the point where they know every line of code within all those communication grids. There's a backbone that's built into the entire infrastructure, so that in the worst case scenario, nuclear bombs get dropped, solar flares burn out all the electronics on the surface of the throughout Canada, and nothing works, the internet goes down, be what it may, or a Y2K bug, the military has the capability to become that backbone. They can use the military lines that we have that are ruggedized and more robust than anything that is available on the civilian side. And we can patch into the civilian network and provide a much lower level of service, but a continued level of service. So if Y2K had not been a bunch of smoke, if it had actually been what everybody was fearing the most, the military would have been able to hook in their equipment, and suddenly your internet speeds would have gone from, now we're going with 2000 timelines, so 10 megabits per second down to 1 megabit per second, or worse. But the point is that emergency services would have still been able to receive 911 calls. People would have still been able to send in bank transfers. People would have still been able to make phone calls to loved ones. Society as a whole would have kept on running. Leading up to 9/11, I started doing training into my in the military we have different stages of training, and they're labeled 1 through 6. Your basic training is level 1. So they sometimes call it QL. So QL1 would be your basic training. QL2 is your next level, and so forth. The major ones that we had to go through in communications was qualification level 3, or QL3, and QL5, with QL4 being on-job training, QL2 being support training, and we're done while you were doing your job. Leading up to 9/11, I was doing my QL3 and QL5 training, and I was doing it through Edmonton again. And I had finished my course, and I was about to fly home when the planes crashed into the buildings in New York. And first thing that I did was call back to the communication center and said, do you need me? What can I do? And the response was, you're off duty. We can't use your help right now. Just go home. Those stories are very similar across the military, across many of the veterans that I talk to. that feeling of, I know I could do more, but I can't. It's that getting back to that, there's always something else you can do. And it leads to how into the future of my career and also into Afghanistan as an example, the number of volunteers that put their name forward to be on the tours vastly filled the positions that were available. And this comes from this desire to protect Canada and to protect Canadians. And that's where this intent comes from. It's an example of that, sort of like where you feel defenseless because, or not defenseless, you feel useless because you're not able to give when you want to. So when you do get the opportunity, you do go and give back. Shortly thereafter, though, I did get a chance to actually do something. So a year later on, actually 6 months later on, I was accepted to reinforce NORAD. So in the Canadian Forces, the military is broken into two levels: the Reserve Force and the Reg Force. The Reg Force is there to support Canada 24/7, 365 days of the year. The Reg Force is the group that we use to send troops overseas on tours. So currently, right now, we have troops in Latvia as part of the NATO defense force to protect against possible aggression from Russia. Whenever a soldier in a Reg Force unit, be it the PPCLI or some of the units that I was a part of, NORAD as an example, or this example, a reserve unit had to move up to the Reg Force and fill in that role while those soldiers were doing other duties elsewhere. So for 2 years, I was supporting NORAD as part of the duties that NORAD provides for defense of North America. I'd like to tell you more about it, but as the saying says, I could tell you, but then I'd have to kill you. One thing that was fun with that, though, was NORAD and specifically communications in general in the military. We are more about the job than about the hierarchy. So one of the interesting things that happened while I was on my tour is we had a general in the place where I was working, and something very important came in, and the general was not authorized to see it. So for the only time in my career, I was fully justified and capable of telling the general to get out of the room, sir. And of course, the general was very upset about the fact that this corporal, lowly corporal, was telling him what to do. He's a general. He should be the one telling the command. And there's the sergeant going, "No, sir, you have to come with me. The corporal is right. Please let him do his job." So one thing, though, I always found with that was having to deal with people of much higher rank than you and telling them something that they had to do. Was you learn to respect the position that somebody was in and what that position means both to your organization and to the overall structure of society as a whole, not necessarily the person that's in that position. So as an example, now whenever I get pulled over by the police for speeding ticket, or if it's a traffic stop, I respect the officer as an officer and the position that they hold as an officer, even if the individual officer may be aggressive, disrespectful, what be it. You respect the position, not the person. And that's one of the things that happen here. It's you respect that he's a general, so you say, "Sir, please leave," rather than "get the." But you still have to get the job done. After coming off the contract with NORAD, I was accepted in a second contract to support CFJSR, or the Canadian Forces Joint Signals Regiment. CFJSR is the most widely deployed unit in Canada. Every single operation that we perform in the world has a unit from CFJSR attached to it. And the main reason for that is because CFJSR is the only unit that can launch and deploy heavy detachments anywhere in the world almost instantly. So I will be covering in, I actually have some pictures coming up right away where I'll be going into the different types of equipment that we have. But as a prelim to it, our detachments fell into two categories: light detachments and heavy detachments. A heavy detachment is everything. It is a fully functional, fully functional communications center. It is an ICT in a box. So we have radio communications, satellite communications, fiber communications, anything that you would expect from a building, like any SaskTel building in a town that provides the whole communications for the town. That is what a heavy detachment would do, but in a tent. So be it cold, be it hot outside, it was cold or hot inside while you were using these. Server room, everything. CFJSR specifically had a mandate to be able to pack up and deploy a heavy detachment to be able to get into a plane within 2 hours, no matter what time of the day, no matter what day of the year. So at one point while I was at CFJSR, we got a call at 2 o'clock in the morning and said, get down to the unit. We have to deploy a unit to Haiti. This is just when in 2003, there was a major earthquake in the capital of Haiti, and we had to send a unit by the end of that day. So by 4 a.m., so 2 o'clock, we got the call. By 4 a.m., we had this full heavy detachment, satellites, radio antennas, fiber optic cabling, server equipment, printers, filing cabinets, everything packed into sea containers and on its way to the airport to be shipped. 4 hours later after that, members of CFJSR that were at the top of the deployment list and had been approved, a unit had been selected to run that detachment. They had said goodbye to their family and they were out the door. So think about that. Within a period of 6 hours, before that 6 hours, these people didn't know that they were going to Haiti. At the end of that 6 hours, they were on a plane to Haiti, and they would be spending 6 months in Haiti, providing communication support for the Haitian people. The same thing happened when we first landed troops in Afghanistan, and when we landed troops in Bosnia and Cyprus, the Golan Heights. Every operation we've done, the first people to hit the ground, CFJSR was there, and usually within 6 hours, those people were out the door going to those locations. While I was at CFJSR, eventually I got onto the tour list, so I got to do a tour of duty. I will be covering that in the second section. After finishing my tour, I basically had enough money to finish off my degree, so I spent the rest of the next 4 years focusing on my on doing reserve training and prepping people for tours, while at the same time finishing off my degree. I was promoted to the rank of Master Corporal, and to this day, I hold the rank of Master Corporal retired. and I was put in charge of a light detachment. So a light detachment is essentially a heavy detachment, but with everything but one specific area ripped out. So in my case, I was a light radio detachment. So we had a radio tower and radio equipment that was ready to go. And we were set up so that we could deploy this radio communication anywhere within our area of expertise, so specifically Southern Saskatchewan. We had to be able to be deployable to anywhere in Southern Saskatchewan to provide radio communications within that area, within however long it takes to drive there. So I did that from 2005 till 2008. And in 2008, I got a job with IBM and got an honorable discharge. So that is just the process of ending your contract and leaving the military. So I got here some pictures of some of the stuff that I did as a career. So the three insignias in the center are the three major units that I talked about that I was part of. The center one here is the main unit that I was a part of. And that's 734 Communication Squadron in Regina. They're now known as 38 Signal Regiment 2 Squadron. And specifically with them is that was the main unit I was a part of, and where I was a light detachment commander. Bottom left is CFJSR, that's their logo, and bottom right is NORAD. On the left hand side here, the two pictures there, that is a heavy detachment. So the outside is about 1/4 of what it looks like on the outside. So our detachment in Afghanistan, which I can't show you pictures of, we had a microwave tower. We had about 3 or 4 satellite dishes. We had, this tent would have gone back 3 times in addition to that, with 3 trucks sitting at the side of it, which would provide the power. Plus on top of it, we had a server room attached to it. And in our case, we also built a decompression area. So after you finished a 8-hour shift, especially if something bad happened on your shift, you could go into a dark, hot room to sort of gather yourself and decompress a bit. The picture above is what it looks like inside those things. So as you can see, it is just a tent. And you can see right to the left of the signal operator there, that that is a radio in a box. So that's how basically everything was in this box, that you could drop that box from an aircraft carrier or from an aircraft. And if the parachute didn't go off, it could survive a 12-story drop without any of the equipment inside getting banged up. You can kind of see that there's a metal frame inside of what looks like a ruggedized Rubbermaid container on the outside. And in between that are shock absorbers too, if this thing falls and drops. And there's these 2 big massive covers that go on the front of them. On the right-hand side is this is a light detachment. In particular, this is not my vehicle, but this is what my vehicle would have looked like. So this is a LSVW, or light vehicle service wheel, or vehicle wheel, sorry. Horrible piece of equipment, hated it. But you can see the big, huge radio antenna off the front. And when fully deployed, basically kind of like with the heavy detachment there, you can kind of see the antennas sticking up on that. That's what these antennas were, and you just didn't have the tent on the back of it. Instead, you were in that box, and inside that box was all the equipment you needed, and it was all connected to the walls. No heater, so Y2K. I was in the back of one of these things in a farmer's field with. In that case, it was a fiber optic light detachment, and I had fiber optics plugged into the military network, and I was getting the green light to whether or not I needed to plug it into SaskTel's network so that I could bypass communications through SaskTel's network into the military's fiber network. At those temperatures, like, so the tables are made of aluminum. When you're writing with a ink pen, the ink freezes. So lots of fun. So in 2004, like I said, I was part of CFJSR at the time. I was offered the option to go on a tour of duty to Afghanistan. Since the War of 1812, when the Americans invaded Canada and the British had to fight the Canadians, or fight the Americans off, Canada has had a proud tradition of our forces, our fighting forces, being 100% voluntary. There's only been one exception in all of Canadian history where we had soldiers that were not volunteers that fought, and that was during World War I. We did conscription in World War II, but the conscription was relegated to support roles only. So admin clerks, cooks, supply technicians, and so forth. The actual soldiers have always been, since World War II, or since World War I, after the end of World War I, has always been volunteers, and prior to that. The main reason for this is that you need to know the person beside you has your back. When I was on my tour, every other person that was on the tour with me, whether they liked me or not, knew that if I would do my job to the level that it was required of me, and I could trust the same of them. And thick or thin, bullets flying, rockets exploding, I was going to do my job, and I knew that they would do their job. That, in of itself, is what allowed our troops to be more successful than any other individual troop in any other nation in the world. And it's also one of the main reasons that whenever the call for conscription is talked about, the first people that will push back against it are military people. So a lovely picture of myself in my tent in Afghanistan. So I was a part of an operation called Operation Athena. It was the very first deployment to Afghanistan. I was actually a part of the between the first and second rotation. So we were there to help the first people that were rotated in. We were helping them rotate out so that the third people could come in. And as a result, everybody gets a coin as a memento of their tour. And if you were to ask any soldier on Remembrance Day, do you have a coin? They should be able to give it to you. If you ask a veteran for their coin and they can't provide the coin, they owe you a drink and a story. And if you ask for their coin and they do present their coin, you owe them a drink, but they still owe you a story. My coin specifically is the 100th coin that was generated, which means that I was the 100th individual on Op Athena. So a little bit of history about Afghanistan. Afghanistan has been in some level of conflict for 200 years. Throughout the 1800s, during the Great Game, Britain and Russia fought over Afghanistan and control and influence over Afghanistan, much to the dislike of the locals, and they fought off both the British and the French for the better part of 100 years. After World War II, when the Great Game ended, Afghanistan fell into intermediate periods of civil war, with different factions fighting for control of the country. In 1997, the Soviets invaded, and they stayed until 1989. And the Soviet-Afghani War was one of the many factors that led to the collapse of the Soviet Union. But at the end of the war, the Mujahideen, who kicked out the Soviets, fractured, and each taking over sections of the country, and the country went back into civil war. Leading up into 9/11, one of the factions of the Mujahideen, a group known as the Taliban, had gained control over Kabul and had become the de facto ruling government of Afghanistan. They were protecting and sheltering Al-Qaeda, which was the force that the terrorist group that bombed the Twin Towers, the Pentagon, and were also planning to blow up the White House. In response to this, a group of international militaries joined together to oust the Taliban and eliminate Al-Qaeda's ability to operate within Afghanistan. And they formed what was known as ISAF, or the International Security Assistance Force. This included Canada, United States, Britain, and many nations from Europe, like the French, the Norwegians, the Germans, and so forth, but also included some unique countries like Mongolia, China, Russia, India, Pakistan. These were all different forces that that we served alongside. I particularly liked working with the Mongolians. They were quite fun to work with. They had a rivalry that went on with the Americans, and they would play pranks on each other. So there were three major achievements I always attribute to my tour, and three things that I find are very valuable that came out of my tour. First was I was there for the very first fully democratic election in Afghanistan. And what I mean by fully, truly democratic election, I mean truly democratic. Prior to this, if there wasn't an election, there would be either only one name on the ballot, or you would have a soldier that would look over somebody's shoulder to make sure that they voted correctly, or they would inspect their ballot after they came out of the booth. When I was in the market one day, because we were allowed to go to I don't have a picture of it, but we were allowed to go to the market to buy stuff. Many of the rugs and stuff that I have around my house are actually bought from Afghanistan. A merchant asked me, he said, "Who am I supposed to vote for?" And I said, "You're going to go into the booth. There are no cameras. There are no soldiers. You're going to mark whoever you want. You're going to close that up. You're going to come out. You're going to place it in the box. And at no point will anybody ever know who you voted for." That ended the conversation. But there was a sense, you could see it in his face. We had just given him agency. We had just given them a choice that he had been denied his entire life. And yeah, the election was not the greatest in the world. Like, it was, there was corruption. There was stuff that country elections all around the world have issues with. But it was their first truly democratic election. Secondly, I was lucky enough to be able to assist in the building of a school for girls. And I actually have a picture of it in the top left corner. That's us building the desks that the girls would use. We found out afterwards, stories from this school, that some of these girls had never been to school ever. In fact, there was one girl in particular that they told us about, 16 years old, and was never learned to read. So she was going to learn to read for the very first time. This school in particular, throughout the next 20 years, developed a choir program where the girls were allowed to form a choir and sing. And when the Taliban took control back over again, these girls slowly made their way to neighboring countries like Turkmenistan, and eventually made their way to Canada. And a lot of them are now in Saskatoon. It was one of the small victories that I still hold on to, that I'm happy about, that I was there to help build the original seed that led to that success. Finally, the main job that we did was we were military communications. We provided the backbone of communications for all the different armed forces that were in Afghanistan. But with that, we provided benefits to the people of Afghanistan. So we built their very first cellular network. We repurposed old Soviet microwave towers to act as the main communication line. So because you couldn't run fiber optics, the ground's there's too many earthquakes in Afghanistan. So we built this framework where we had Soviet antennas, German equipment, and Canadian coding on it, that provided the framework for the cellular towers that were used at that time in Afghanistan. I don't know if those towers are still there, but we were the ones that helped put that in for them. You can't underestimate the power that modern technology has in bringing democracy to a country. Most of the men in Afghanistan didn't. They saw cell phones for what they are. We see them here. They're a tool. They allowed them to, make calls, to talk to somebody. They allowed them to look up stuff that would have been harder for them to look up if they had to go to some sort of list or somewhere that they had. For the women of Afghanistan, this was freedom. Life as a woman in Afghanistan is brutal. It is the only country in the world where women have a lower life expectancy than men. The only country in the world that's like that. If a woman wanted to talk to her friend, she must get permission from her husband, her father, or her brother to be escorted to her friend's house so that they could have a visit. If under Taliban times, if a woman wanted to learn to read, there was a death penalty on the teacher. So if the teacher taught a woman how to read, they would be executed. Having a cell phone meant they no longer have to talk to their son, their husband, their father to be escorted to a friend's house. They could now call them. If they wanted to look at what the news was, they could do that. If they wanted to bring up a tutorial video on how to learn how to read, or how to see what's happening outside of their town, what's the weather going to be like, this was their access to the outside world that was denied to them their entire lives. This is why it was so vital that we built the cell network and gave them that freedom. In 2021, the Taliban came back in power. This is probably one of the hardest bit of news I ever got in my life. And most of the soldiers the veterans that I worked with feel the same way. It felt like there was a job that needed to be done, and it felt like you had built this beautiful castle, sandcastle, and now it had just been kicked over. And we all knew that leading up to the Taliban taking over, we all knew that the job was not done, that we needed to be there longer. We needed to complete the job. And now we know that it's not going to happen. And basically it felt like defeat, and it sucked a lot. And it's something that's brings, even to this day, I feel sad about it. And I wish there was more that we could do for the people of Afghanistan, but I know that that's not possible. So I have some pictures here from my tour. So like I said, the top left here, this is the us building the school, their tables and their chairs. Top right was our mascot. So Afghanistan is a desert country that is infested with two specific pests, scorpions, of which we were able to capture one that was in the server room, and camel spiders, which just do a search for camel spiders, you'll see what they look like. I actually had one bite me on the ankle during my tour. They are not pleasant. In the center here is a typical suburb in Kabul. The houses are built into the sides of the mountain because Afghanistan is a very earthquake-prone country. It's on the verge of the Indian subcontinent plate and the Asian plate, and the mountains are called the Hindu Kush Mountains. And as a result, there's just tons of earthquakes all the time. So the houses are built into inside of the mountain so that they don't collapse. The center left, this is a picture of our cenotaph. So when I went there, it was just after the 6 Canadian soldiers had died from an IED bomb, and the cenotaph was created to commemorate them. By the time at the end of the tour, a full memorial had been built for all the international soldiers that had died on that tour in Kabul. Below that is a picture of a building that had been bombed at one point. Even though the building's in ruins, people moved back in, and the building could collapse at any moment. You can kind of see like the floors kind of collapse just on the slight edge there. But it's somebody's home, so they live in there nonetheless. Bottom center is what I lived in for 6 months. So at one point, the temperature got up to 56 degrees Celsius and stayed there for 3 days. I had to sleep in that. So typically what I would do is I would just put a towel down and it would capture all the sweat. So lots of fun. And finally, in the right, so the bottom right, it takes doctors, engineers, diplomats to bring peace. And this is an example of that. So this is a German project that was done to build an office building. The international community, so Japan, China, France, Germany, United States, Canada, Britain, Australia, New Zealand, we all had projects on the go inside of Afghanistan throughout the entire time of the tour, where we built buildings so that people could get jobs. We built roads. We built city buses. We built everything that you take for a living. We built, and it was going to take probably a better part of 30 to 40 years for us to fully build up the country, because they had been at war for 200 years. But that is how we knew that we were going to win the war. But anyway, I'm running out of time here, so if people have to drop off, feel free to drop off. But I'll be just touching the last little bit, and I'll make sure I have room for questions. I'll stay online in case people have questions. So this is me in my full regala. So I am the Sergeant at Arms of Branch 35 of the Royal Canadian Legion. For those who don't know, the Legion is an organization that was founded by veterans for veterans. It was set up right after World War I. And the primary focus of the Legion nowadays is to provide services for veterans, such as a place where they can go and socialize with other veterans, and provide advocacy for veteran concerns. Mostly right now, the biggest initiative that we have going is our PTSD initiative, where we bring awareness of PTSD and encourage the government to provide support services for veterans who are suffering from PTSD. When I talk about a veteran, it's anybody who served in emergency services. So predominantly the military, but also RCMP, police, EMT workers, firefighters, and other services, lifeguards and so forth, that rangers and so forth, that help provide the safety net and the emergency services for Canada. Finally, I'd like to talk a little bit about the Poppy campaign. So every single year at Remembrance Day, the main job that the Legion does is they raise money through a thing called the Poppy campaign, which is used to pay for all of our initiatives that we do throughout the year. So whenever you see the thing where you can buy your poppies in Canadian Tire or so forth, that money goes to the Poppy campaign and is used for all these, like the PTSD initiative, like to pay for counseling for veterans who are suffering from PTSD. Finally, a sergeant at arms. So my job within in the Legion is I am the military face of the Legion. So every Legion has a president and a sergeant at arms. The president is the organizational head of the Legion, and the sergeant at arms is the military person. So whenever you see somebody with a bright red sash and the Legion logo on it, that is the sergeant of arms, and their responsibility is to run the parades, make sure everything's run timely, and maintain the policies and procedures of the Legion within their branch. That being said, if you have any questions, if you don't want to say your questions out loud, feel free to put them into the chat. Otherwise, feel free to come off mute and ask your questions if you have any. And I will stay online for as long as people want to ask questions. So the first one is, what kind of career path do you recommend for people who are in their mid or late 30s, someone with an IT background? So the absolute oldest you can be to go on basic training is 35 years old. So if you are 35 years old or older, you will not be accepted for basic training. The one thing I would say is with this presentation is don't think of it as a recruitment video for the military. Think of it as more of information for somebody that's in industry as a whole. So if you get into a management position, I recommend that if you know that you have an employee who is in the military, keep in mind that they have to do their 3s training, their 5s training, their 6 training, and they're going to ask for 2 months off to do that. So I would say keep that as the point. The second thing that I would want to emphasize with this presentation is with Remembrance Day. I highly encourage everybody to participate in some way. The most easiest thing that you can do and the simplest thing that you can do that has the most amount of impact is to buy a poppy from Canadian Tire, Coles bookstore. If you ask the Legion, they'll be able to tell you where you can buy poppies. You can even buy it from them directly. I actually like right now the Legions themselves. There's inside the poppies you can get these black pins. So instead of having the pin that will stab you, you can actually have a proper lapel pin that won't stab you. Comes with like the backing, similar to like any other type of pin you would have. But I also encourage you to look at services that are online or attend the services. There's going to be a service at the branch this year in Regina, and similar one at PC Center. PC. Anybody in Saskatoon, please correct me. The main auditorium area in the south of Saskatoon. Understand that the biggest thing that veterans want to do is they want to tell their story. They want to have a voice. And the best thing you can do on Remembrance Day for a veteran is, like I said, not to thank them for the service, but instead to ask them about their story. Give them a way to be able to answer that story. If you have somebody who is, like, if you have a kid that is about to go into university and they're looking to get a job that is challenging, but will give them a good sense of discipline and a training in IT. There's 3 jobs in specific in military communications. Signal operator is probably the most the one that I would recommend the most, because it's never ever been closed. Ever since we've had signal operators, every other job, cooks, supply techs, artillery, armored, you name it, at some point they recruited their quota. They never have a limit on the quota of number of infanteers, so that's never been shut down. But they've also never met their quota for signal operators. So if you want to get in IT and you want to have that practical knowledge and then get that military experience with it, that would be the main one. But there's also 2 other. There is the IT tech, which is very similar to a hardware engineer, and a lineman, which a lot of our linemen actually it gets them the skills necessary to work for places like SaskPower, MCpl, because those skills are directly transferable. The military training directly transfers to the civilian world. So question here. Joining the military is a great learning experience, like how to put a general in their place, but less effective in the civilian world. So the biggest thing I would say that my military career gave me for my civilian side is, like I said at the very beginning, attention to detail, the feeling that there's always more that I can do, and always more that I can learn and improve at. And also the take responsibility for your actions. I actually, one thing I did, so I did my junior leadership training to become a Master Corporal. And one of the things that, maybe what I'll do is, Jonathan, I could probably put this in the attachments of the invite on LinkedIn, but everybody gets these, when you do your junior leadership, you get this little card, and it says principles of military leadership, and in it has and stuff like make sure you follow, make sure that your followers know your meaning and intent, and lead them to the accomplishment of the mission, and other such stuff. I'll put a link into the link notes that get sent out so people can have them. But that's probably the biggest thing that I think that I got from, directly applies to the civilian world. So there's a question from Melody. What do you think about modern warfare concerning the usage of new equipment such as drones? There's a really great comment from an American futurist, and he said, keep them simple, keep them dumb, or you'll be underneath Skynet's thumb. I feel that drones in the military must always be under the direct control and authority of a human at all times. And the main reason for that is so that that there is always somebody responsible. Somebody's neck is always on the line, legally and authoritarily, whenever a drone is used. As long as that stays in place, you can have AI designate targets, you can have surveillance drones, to map out areas, and all these tools are going to be used by commanders to give them an advantage on the battlefield. But anytime that a drone dive bombs and blows up a target, or fires a missile and hits a target, or shoots a machine gun and hits a target, that has to be at the command of a human. And that's my personal opinion, and that's what has been advocated to the Canadian government and to NORAD, or sorry, no, not RAD, NATO specifically. So any future war where NATO forces are going to fight, that is going to be their mandate. Somebody somewhere in the chain of command is going to be responsible for any death caused by a drone. As for the adoption of equipment, communications is probably the best example. Like, so Canada is the first country in the world to have a signal corps, and we are one of the fastest countries in the world for the adoption of technology in general. And we develop our technology to enhance our capabilities, but it always comes from the point of view of what we do with that technology is meant to empower our soldiers and make them more effective. And there's a concept in the military called a force multiplier. Any technology that can make a soldier 5% more effective, 20% more effective, is something that is and should be adopted by the military, because the more effective your soldier is, the better they can do their job of protecting those who are going to build peace in the world. Hopefully that answers your question. Okay. Are there any other questions? So on behalf of KIPS, thank you for giving me this opportunity to share my story and my experience. I greatly appreciate it, and there will be a survey that goes out to people. Please fill in the survey and provide your input onto it. The KIPS uses this survey to further refine our presentations going forward. If you are interested in volunteering for KIPS, for any of our committees, feel free to reach out to KIPS. The email is at the top here. So, or sorry, that's the certification. We'll put the, Maria, can you put the email for KIPS Saskatchewan in the chat, please? Reach out to us if you want to volunteer for any of our committees. We have a programs committee that we're looking for volunteers. We have a student liaison committee that we're looking for volunteers. Reach out if you wish to participate in those areas, or ask about other areas that you can participate in. I will stay online for the next little bit if you have any additional questions, but thank you, and we'll see you at the next event.